The apartment was silent, yet thick with tension, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath deliberate. Claire stood in the dim morning light, her hands trembling, hair loose across her shoulders, and her eyes cast downward, avoiding every question. "Please, don't be angry," she whispered, voice barely audible over the ticking clock. But the absence of the gold band she wore yesterday was screaming louder than any words could. Mark's pulse spiked as he noticed it, disbelief twisting into fear, betrayal, and something darker. How could a simple ring vanish without explanation? His mind raced through every possibility, every shadow of doubt that had ever lingered at the edges of their marriage. The morning sun, filtering through half-closed blinds, caught dust motes that floated like the fragments of trust between them. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious while inside. Everything had shifted in an instant. Claire's lips quivered and Mark's hands clenched, silent questions hanging in the air like smoke. The missing ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a fracture, and the first crack had already appeared. "Ah!" Mark's chest tightened as he asked the first question he had dreaded but couldn't avoid. "Where is it, Claire?" The words trembled from his lips, heavy with accusation he didn't want to voice, but couldn't suppress. Claire's eyes widened. She seemed smaller, swallowed by guilt and fear. I don't know," she murmured, voice cracking. The apartment seemed to shrink around them, walls leaning in, pressing their shared history into the space between them. Memories of laughter, arguments, and whispered promises collided with the stark reality of absence. Every photograph of weddings and anniversaries became an echo of the trust that now hung by a thread. Mark's mind raced, replaying every fleeting glance and small secret he might have missed. He wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand answers, yet the emptiness of her hand silenced him more than any shout ever could. Each tick of the clock was a hammer, striking the fragile balance between love and suspicion. Claire retreated to the living room, perching on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. Mark followed, careful but rigid, his gaze never leaving her. The silence between them was thick, punctuated by the soft hum of the refrigerator and distant city noise, seeping through closed windows. Her eyes flicked to the coffee table, to the empty ring box she had hidden in a drawer last night, but no words came out. He wanted to ask again, but each question seemed heavier than the last, like pulling a thread that might unravel everything. She inhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling in an uneven rhythm, and Mark felt the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on him. Each passing second felt infinite, their shared breaths trembling in the room like fragile glass ready to shatter. Mark's eyes lingered on the empty ring finger again. The absence, a quiet accusation that seemed louder than any confrontation. Claire's voice trembled. "I didn't take it. I swear." Her words barely filled the space between them, but the desperation behind them painted vivid images in his mind of theft, lies, and betrayal. Memories of intimate moments hand in hand, laughter in dimly lit rooms, now collided with the stark reality of uncertainty. He wanted to believe her, but the gap between faith and doubt widened with every heartbeat. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a drama neither wanted, but both were trapped in. Their shared history was visible in the scattered belongings, the framed photographs on walls, the tiny imperfections of life together. But now every object seemed to whisper questions, secrets and warning signs he hadn't noticed before. And smatchers say, Norfi, news for. Finally, Claire stood, pacing near the window, backlit by fading morning light, hair falling across her face like a veil. I don't know what happened, she whispered, her voice breaking, but her eyes told a different story. Mark remained silent, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to unravel the mystery. to confront every hidden truth he feared might be revealed. The city outside seemed indifferent, oblivious to the personal catastrophe unfolding within the walls of their apartment. The sun climbed higher, casting stripes of light and shadow across their faces, highlighting the unspoken tension, the fear, and the fragility of trust. Each step Claire took was weighted with guilt, each pause an unspoken confession, and Mark knew the morning had changed everything. The missing ring was not just jewelry, it was the first crack in the life they thought unbreakable. The afternoon sun had climbed higher, spilling harsh light through the blinds and illuminating every corner of the apartment with unforgiving clarity. Mark, 32, traced the edge of the countertop where the ring had been, his jaw tight, mind spinning through possibilities. Claire, 29, sat silently on the sofa, knees pulled to her chest, staring at a photograph of their wedding, her lips quivering. The silence was heavy, pregnant with accusation and fear. He wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but each word seemed trapped in the air, dissolving before it could form. Their history, the quiet nights, the shared laughter, the whispered confessions, now felt fragile, as if one wrong question could shatter it completely. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, unaware of the fracture that had opened inside these walls. Mark clenched his fists, eyes flicking between Claire's anxious expression and the empty space where the ring had been, realizing that trust was a currency he didn't know how to reclaim. Claire's voice broke the silence, hesitant and fragile. I didn't lose it. I swear, Mark. I never... Her words stopped, swallowed by the knot of fear tightening in her chest. Mark's gaze pierced her like a spotlight, searching for any sign of deception. He didn't want to doubt her, but the empty ring finger was undeniable. Each second stretched endlessly, filled with the weight of unspoken possibilities. The apartment, once a cocoon of comfort, now felt like a cage, enclosing secrets and suspicion. Mark thought of their life together, the shared laughter, the quiet nights, and suddenly, it all seemed vulnerable, fragile. Every tiny movement, every glance carried new meaning. Claire's hands fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan, and Mark realized that this small, trembling motion revealed more than her words ever could. Mark paced the apartment, every step measured, a storm brewing behind his eyes. I need the truth, Claire, he said, voice low but unyielding. Claire's 29-year-old frame shook slightly as she lifted her gaze, eyes glossy, brimming with unspoken confessions. I don't know what to tell you, she whispered, voice quivering, lips pressed tightly together. The sunlight caught her hair, turning each strand golden, but the warmth did nothing to soften the icy tension between them. Time seemed suspended, the walls pressing inward, trapping memories and doubts together in a suffocating embrace. Mark stopped, fists clenched, the weight of suspicion and fear coiling tightly around his chest. The empty ring finger wasn't just a void, it was a revelation of fragility, a silent accusation that neither of them could ignore. Claire finally stood, moving toward the balcony door, the city outside a blur of motion and noise. I can't explain it, she said, voice barely audible over distant traffic, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile barrier between them. Mark, 32, followed, his shadow long across the living room floor, every step deliberate, every movement weighted with suspicion. The afternoon sun caught the dust in the air, highlighting every mote as if the apartment itself were revealing secrets. Claire's 29-year-old hands gripped the railing, knuckles white while her eyes searched for escape in the distant skyline. Mark's gaze never wavered, noting every tremble, every hesitant glance, cataloging the inconsistencies like evidence in a case he couldn't solve. The ring was gone, and with it, the unspoken certainty of trust, leaving only questions and fractured hearts. Wow, Mark reached out, almost touching Claire's shoulder, but hesitated, unsure if he wanted contact or confrontation. I trusted you, he murmured, voice heavy with betrayal and hurt. Claire turned slowly. 29, eyes brimming with tears, hair slightly tangled, pale skin glowing in the fading light. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, a gesture that spoke louder than words. Silence returned, denser than before, wrapping around them like a shroud. Outside, the city roared on, indifferent to the private devastation unfolding in the apartment. The missing ring wasn't merely a physical absence, it was a rupture, a symbol that trust, once broken, left a void that even time struggled to fill. Both knew that after this afternoon, nothing could return to how it had been. The questions were too loud, the tension too thick, and the truth too fragile to emerge without consequence. Evening descended over the city, the apartment now bathed in a golden haze from the sinking sun. Mark, 32, stood near the window, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes scanning Claire, 29, whose figure trembled as she lingered in the kitchen doorway. "Why now?" he asked, voice low, laced with frustration and disbelief. Claire's eyes darted to the floor, avoiding his gaze, hair falling in front of her face like a shield. "I don't know," she whispered, each word heavy with hesitation and fear. Shadows lengthened across the room, accentuating the distance between them, both physical and emotional. Memories of their life together, the wedding, quiet nights, shared smiles, clashed violently with the raw tension that now filled the air. The missing ring was more than jewelry. It had become a symbol of betrayal, and Mark felt the fragile foundation of their relationship cracking under the weight of suspicion and doubt. Every passing second deepened the rift, and neither could ignore the unspoken truth waiting to emerge. Claire moved to the living room, sinking onto the sofa, hands covering her face, trying to hold herself together. Mark, 32, paced slowly, his mind racing through every possible explanation. "Did someone take it?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper, yet filled with tension. Claire's 29-year-old frame shook violently as she shook her head, voice muffled. The apartment felt suffocating, walls pressing in, every object a silent witness to the growing suspicion. The sunlight dimmed behind the buildings, leaving streaks of orange and shadow that mirrored the turmoil within. The missing ring had become a mystery, one neither of them could fully articulate, and each second of silence was more damning than any accusation. Their past and present collided violently in the space, leaving only doubt, fear, and the stark realization that the truth might be beyond reach. Mark finally stopped, leaning against the wall, eyes narrowing as he tried to control the storm inside him. "I can't just pretend this didn't happen," he said, voice low but firm. Claire, 29, sat silently, biting her lip, tears glistening in her eyes, trying to suppress her panic. The missing ring had become a symbol not just of trust lost, but of secrets that neither knew how to navigate. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground, every corner filled with memories and tension alike. Even small, ordinary objects, the coffee cup, the photo frames, the blinds, seemed charged with accusation. Each second was a test, and the silence between them stretched until it felt like it could crack the walls themselves. The question was no longer just about the ring. It was about the truth, their relationship, and whether either could survive the fracture that had begun. Claire suddenly stood, walking to the dining table, her movements hesitant but purposeful. "I think maybe it's gone for good," she whispered, voice fragile and trembling. Mark's 32-year-old gaze locked on her, incredulous, searching for a hint of deception. The sunlight through the blinds now cast long stripes across the floor, highlighting the space between them. The apartment felt silent, yet oppressive, each object a reminder of the life they shared, now shadowed by doubt. The missing ring had transformed from a simple object to an emblem of fractured trust, threatening to unravel years of shared history in a matter of hours. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he tried to hold on to calm, yet every instinct screamed that nothing would ever be the same. As night approached, the apartment dimmed into muted tones, shadows deepening around corners. Mark 32 finally sank into a chair, exhausted, his eyes heavy with frustration and fear. Claire, 29, sat across from him, hands clasped in her lap, staring at the floor, trying to muster the courage to speak. "We need to figure this out," Mark said softly, voice tinged with both determination and despair. Claire's lips quivered. She nodded, knowing the coming hours would define everything. The missing ring was more than a symbol. It was a test of honesty, love, and resilience. The evening stretched on, heavy and silent, the city outside oblivious to the private turmoil inside. Every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to echo the question neither could answer. Would their trust survive the fracture the ring had revealed? Night fully settled over the city, bathing the apartment in cold shadows. Mark, 32, paced back and forth near the balcony, fists clenched, jaw tight, each step punctuated by the weight of frustration and disbelief. Claire, 29, sat on the edge of the sofa, eyes downcast, hands wringing the hem of her cardigan. "I don't understand how this could happen," Mark muttered, voice low but heavy with accusation. The missing ring had become a chasm between them, swallowing trust and leaving doubt in its wake. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, walls closing in as memories of laughter and love clashed violently with suspicion. Claire's breath was shallow, each inhale trembling, as if the very act of breathing might unravel her. Mark's gaze alternated between her and the empty countertop where the ring had been, the absence now a glaring, accusatory symbol. The silence between them was deafening, each second stretching with the tension of unsaid truths and unasked questions, leaving the night to witness the slow fracture of everything they once believed unbreakable. Claire's voice broke, fragile and almost pleading. "Mark, maybe someone took it. I don't know who," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. Mark's 32-year-old frame stiffened. Suspicion and disbelief surged through him. The apartment seemed to shrink, walls pressing closer, each object casting elongated shadows that mirrored the tension between them. The missing ring was no longer a mere piece of metal. It had become a symbol of betrayal, of secrets neither could yet confront. Every glance they exchanged carried weight, each silence pregnant with fear and doubt. Outside, the city's neon lights glimmered mockingly, oblivious to the private devastation unfolding inside. Mark tried to control his anger, yet every instinct screamed at him that nothing would return to normal until the truth, whatever it might be, was revealed. Mark's patience frayed. He slammed a hand against the countertop, the sound echoing through the apartment. "I need honesty, Claire. I need everything." His voice trembled between fury and fear. Claire, 29, flinched, eyes wide, lips trembling as if words themselves might betray her. The city outside was a blur of lights and motion. But within these walls, time had slowed to a tense, suffocating crawl. The missing ring was no longer just about trust. It was about survival of a bond built over years, now threatened by silence and uncertainty. Every object in the apartment, every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to amplify the urgency, the weight of unsaid truths pressing down until both felt the room itself might collapse under the tension. Claire rose abruptly, moving toward the hallway, her 29-year-old frame trembling, eyes scanning for some invisible escape from the mounting tension. "I didn't. I wouldn't. I swear," she cried, voice cracking under strain. Mark 32 followed closely, every step deliberate, chest tight, heart hammering with fear and anger. The shadows of the apartment stretched long across the floors, walls and furniture, creating a labyrinth of light and dark that mirrored their fractured trust. The missing ring had become a specter, haunting every movement, every glance, every pause. The apartment's air felt thick with uncertainty, and for the first time, both realized that the day's events had pushed them to the brink, forcing choices, confessions, and reckonings they had both been avoiding. Finally, Claire stopped at the bedroom door, leaning against the frame, breathing unevenly, eyes full of desperation. Maybe it's gone forever, she whispered, her 29-year-old voice barely audible over the sound of their racing hearts. Mark, 32, stood a few feet away, muscles tense, jaw clenched, eyes dark with fear and disbelief. The apartment felt smaller, claustrophobic, each shadow amplified by the dim light of night filtering through blinds. The missing ring had become a mirror, reflecting every doubt, fear, and unresolved tension between them. Both understood, silently and painfully, that nothing would ever feel the same again. The fracture had widened, and trust, fragile and precious, hung by a thread. Outside, the city roared on, oblivious, while inside, every heartbeat and whispered word felt like a reckoning, a prelude to the choices yet to come. The apartment was quiet, but every sound felt amplified. The distant hum of traffic, the soft creak of floorboards, the rhythm of their own breathing. Mark, 32, stood rigid in the living room, eyes fixed on Claire, 29, who hovered near the kitchen counter, wringing her hands. "Claire, enough hiding! Tell me the truth," he demanded, voice low but unyielding, each word weighted with frustration and fear. Claire's lips quivered, her gaze darted to the floor, searching for some invisible escape. I don't know what to say," she whispered, voice trembling. Mark's heart raced, suspicion and dread coiling tightly in his chest. The empty ring finger was more than an absence. It was a symbol of everything they could no longer ignore. Their shared history seemed fragile, suspended in that single tense moment, and the apartment walls felt like witnesses to the unraveling of their bond. Every glance, every pause, every unspoken thought magnified the tension that had been building all day. Claire moved slightly, pacing near the living room window, shadows stretching across the floor. I think someone took it while I wasn't paying attention," she confessed, voice barely above a whisper. Mark's 32-year-old eyes narrowed, heart pounding, mind spinning through every possible scenario. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, every second stretching endlessly as the weight of her words sank in. The missing ring was no longer just a symbol. It was a mystery, a fracture in trust and a question neither of them could answer alone. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent life, neon lights flickering against dark buildings, while inside, every glance, every subtle movement carried the tension of suspicion and fear. Their history, once a comforting continuum, now felt fragile, like glass teetering on the edge of a table. Mark finally stepped closer, fists slightly trembling, voice a low growl. "Then we need to find out who." Claire, 29, flinched but nodded, eyes wide, tears brimming. The apartment felt charged with urgency. Every object and corner heightened the sense of pressure, and every flicker of light seemed to spotlight their unease. The missing ring had become a puzzle, a test of honesty and courage, and the tension had reached a breaking point. Time seemed suspended, the air thick with the weight of suspicion and unspoken fears. Mark's mind raced through scenarios, culprits, explanations, while Claire tried desperately to maintain composure, aware that each glance and each small gesture was being scrutinized. They were no longer just a couple. They were detectives and suspects in a game neither wanted to play. Claire suddenly froze, noticing something glinting on the floor beneath the sofa. Her 29-year-old eyes widened, heart hammering. "Wait, is that it?" she whispered, stepping closer, trembling hands reaching down. Mark, 32, followed immediately, eyes narrowing as he crouched, tension radiating from every line of his body. The glint revealed the missing gold ring, partially hidden under a throw pillow, its presence sending a shockwave through both of them. Relief, anger, suspicion, all collided in the same instant. The mystery had not vanished. It had been lying in plain sight, an unexpected twist in a day full of uncertainty. The apartment seemed to breathe again, yet the underlying tension lingered, a reminder that trust, once fractured, could not be instantly restored. Mark grabbed the ring carefully, holding it between his fingers, gaze locked on Claire. Relief and frustration mingled on his 32-year-old face, while Claire, 29, exhaled shakily, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling. "I didn't see it. I swear." The tension in the apartment slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile understanding that mistakes, misplacement, and miscommunication could almost destroy years of trust. The ring, now safely in Mark's hand, symbolized more than reconciliation. It was a lesson in patience, vigilance, and the fragility of love. Yet both knew that while the immediate crisis had passed, the echoes of fear and suspicion would linger, shaping the choices and words they exchanged in the days to come. The city outside carried on, oblivious, while inside, they faced the delicate work of rebuilding what had almost been lost. Night deepened outside, painting the apartment in cool blue tones, the city lights flickering faintly through the blinds. Mark, 32, sat at the kitchen table, gold ring in hand, jaw tight, thoughts racing. Claire, 29, stood nearby, long brown hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes wide and tearful, cardigan draped loosely over her dress. "I can't believe it was just here the whole time," Mark muttered, voice tight with lingering frustration. Despite relief, unease of trust felt fragile, almost unnatural after the day's events. Shadows stretched across the walls, elongating their features, mirroring the emotional distance that had crept in. Every glance between them carried the weight of unspoken questions. What if something like this happened again? Could their bond survive a deeper fracture? The apartment, quiet yet charged, became a crucible for both reflection and fear, revealing how tenuous certainty could be even in the life they thought secure. Claire took a hesitant step closer, voice trembling. "I'm sorry for making you doubt me. I didn't mean to, I just didn't notice it was missing." Mark, 32, exhaled slowly, tension still coiling in his shoulders, trying to translate relief into patience. The room felt heavy with unsaid words, their hearts still racing despite the resolution of the immediate crisis. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent life, but inside, every flicker of light, every shadow, reminded them of how easily a fragile trust could be fractured. They both knew that while the ring was found, the emotional residue of suspicion and fear would not disappear with it. Rebuilding faith would be slower than locating the missing jewelry, each gesture and glance requiring careful negotiation of lingering doubts. Suddenly, Mark's phone buzzed sharply on the kitchen counter, breaking the fragile calm. He glanced at the screen, brow furrowed, tension instantly returning. "It's, a text from work," he muttered, voice low, but unease rippled through him. Claire, 29, stiffened, her 29-year-old hands brushing over her cardigan nervously. The intrusion reminded them that life outside the apartment continued relentlessly, indifferent to personal turmoil. The ring was found, but external pressures were waiting, threatening to pull their fragile peace apart. Every second now seemed charged with potential disaster, each notification, each sound amplifying lingering anxiety. The apartment no longer felt like a safe haven. It was a stage for the unknown, where trust, tension, and reality collided. Mark picked up the phone, scanning the message, eyes narrowing. "It's urgent," he muttered, a flicker of worry crossing his 32-year-old face. Claire, 29, moved closer instinctively, her long brown hair falling forward, eyes wide with apprehension. The simple domestic chaos of a missing ring had given way to a larger reality, They could no longer retreat into the safety of their apartment. The weight of responsibility and external demands pressed down, threatening to undo the fragile calm they had just begun to reclaim. Shadows pooled in corners, accentuating the growing tension, while the city beyond the blinds seemed oblivious. Each second stretched, filled with anticipation, fear, and the awareness that the next revelation could change everything they thought they had resolved. Claire, 29, suddenly exhaled, attempting to steady her racing heart. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," she whispered, her voice fragile but resolute. Mark, 32, looked at her, jaw still tight, tension still visible in his posture, yet a trace of trust returned in his eyes. The missing ring had been a microcosm of fear, doubt, and mistrust. And now, facing the larger unknown together felt like a cautious first step toward repairing the fissures in their relationship. The apartment, though dim and shadowed, seemed slightly less oppressive, a stage for resilience rather than fracture. The city lights outside glimmered like distant promises, while inside, both understood that trust, once broken, required vigilance, patience, and courage to rebuild. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the apartment. Mark, 32, sat rigid at the kitchen table, still processing the urgent message from last night, jaw tight, fingers tapping lightly against the wood. Claire, 29, stood near the window, hair falling loosely over her shoulders, cardigan draped around her frame, eyes wide with anticipation and fear. The previous day's tension had not fully lifted, and now a new challenge loomed. "Whatever this is," Mark said slowly, voice low but determined, "we handle it together." Claire's 29-year-old hands clutched the hem of her cardigan, a small gesture of nervous hope as she nodded. The apartment, though quiet, vibrated with expectation, the calm before the storm. Their trust, fragile but mending, was about to be tested one final time, and the outcome would determine whether the fractures of the past could finally be healed, or whether doubt would claim them entirely. Claire approached Mark cautiously, voice steady despite lingering fear. "I want us to move forward. Without fear, without doubt," she said, eyes glistening, long brown hair falling forward, her 29-year-old hands trembling slightly. Mark's 32-year-old face softened for the first time in hours, a mixture of relief and lingering wariness evident in his expression. The city, beyond the blinds, continued to pulse with life, oblivious to the intimate reconciliation taking place inside. The gold ring lay on the table between them, a symbol of both fragility and hope, the tangible anchor for trust reborn. Every breath felt weighted with possibility, as if the apartment itself were holding its own collective exhale. The fracture of yesterday still lingered, but now the first careful steps toward repair were being taken, tentative and cautious, yet meaningful. Mark reached out slowly, fingers brushing Claire's 29-year-old hand, resting on the table. A spark of connection passed between them, tentative yet undeniable. "We can't undo the fear, but we can choose trust," he said, voice low and deliberate, each word carrying weight. Claire nodded, eyes glistening, her long brown hair falling back over her shoulders. The apartment, once oppressive with tension, now felt like a fragile sanctuary, holding space for dialogue, honesty, and reconciliation. The gold ring, warm and gleaming in Mark's hand, symbolized the tangible and emotional repair they were undertaking together. Outside, the city roared on, unaware. But inside, time seemed to pause, allowing a moment of fragile, tentative healing. Claire's 29-year-old lips curved into a small, relieved smile, her hands now lightly holding Mark's 32-year-old hands. "I don't want us to lose what we have over. Mistakes," she whispered, voice fragile but sincere. Mark's eyes softened, the tension easing, but awareness remained. Trust had been tested, and rebuilding it required vigilance and care. The apartment seemed to exhale with them, shadows softening, light spilling across the wooden floors, the city outside shimmering like a distant promise. They were not fully healed, but the first steps toward understanding, forgiveness, and emotional intimacy had been taken. The gold ring on Mark's finger, or soon to be clasped back on Claire's, was no longer just jewelry. It was a testament to the resilience of connection, the weight of honesty, and the courage to confront uncertainty together. Finally, Mark carefully slid the gold ring back onto Claire's 29-year-old finger, a symbolic gesture weighted with apology, trust, and hope. Claire's eyes filled with tears, a mix of relief and renewed faith, as the morning sun highlighted the golden band. Mark, 32, exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing, jaw softening, the tension of the past days beginning to dissipate. The apartment, once a crucible of doubt and fear, now held a quiet calm. A fragile peace forged through confrontation, honesty, and emotional courage. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. But inside, Claire and Mark understood that they had survived the test of uncertainty, and that the bonds of trust, though once fractured, could endure if nurtured carefully. The missing ring had returned, and with it, a renewed commitment to face whatever challenges lay ahead together.